Right, everybody. I am here with Scott Allen. Scott, for those of us that don't know who you are, can you just introduce yourself a little bit while I hook up my headphones?
Yeah, my name is Scott Allen. I've been in SEO for quite a while. I'm one of the coaches in the Superstar SEO Academy. I own two agencies, and one of them is kind of a general marketing company, and the other one is focused specifically on medical marketing, and that's it.
That's not it. I actually missed a lot of what you said, so I don't know if it is or not. Do you? So you covered how you specialize in like dental and medical marketing and stuff like that.
Yeah, I have a unique situation where I actually have he's actually my personal dentist. He's a client and he's part of one of the companies, which really helps with the client attraction portion of it. Is when he calls as a doctor, that gets past the gatekeeper. And I never thought I would find dentistry and medical stuff as interesting as I do, but it's been a fun process to learn the lingo and the business behind dentistry and the business behind running a medical business.
So that's like the majority of what you do, right? Like I'm sure you have other types of clients, but the bulk of them are dentists and other medical professionals. Is that right?
Yeah. The bulk of them is, right now we've got a couple dentists, a few orthodontists, and some plastic surgeons. So not all in the mouth.
Do you have any like non-medical clients too, or are you just do that?
We do. We've got a production company in Los Angeles. We have a detailing, a luxury auto detail shop, athletic trainer. I'm trying to think off the top of my head what the rest of them are.
So you focus on one thing, but if somebody else wants to give you money, you won't tell them no.
Yes.
Basically. That makes sense. You stay focused, but you don't pass up a payday, basically.
Yep.
And what's the advantage of focusing on one particular industry or niche, as we call it in SEO, like that?
The advantage of niching down is that you become the expert in not only the content, each niche has its own idiosyncrasies as far as what works. Doing what you do on a plumbing website may not work as well as something working in the dental space, as an example. So you get a knowledge of what works, what Google likes in the particular niche. And it's not necessarily SEO related, but it certainly helps you with the discovery calls, the sales calls. If you understand the language and the lingo, if you speak their language, that establishes trust. And particularly in the medical space, they have been approached thousands of times by marketers, and their radar is already up. So if you start to understand using the same words, the terminology that lets them know you've been in and around doctors, that helps to move the process along.
And you said you were in a unique situation, but if somebody has an agency and they wanted to niche it down or get industry specific like that, what advice would you give them? How would you go about choosing one? What should they do to establish themselves as an expert in that particular vertical?
What I like to do if I end up in a niche that I'm not familiar with is I will go around and spot check. The first thing I do is go around and spot check random cities, like pretty big cities, do like San Francisco, Atlanta, Chicago, Miami, just different large metropolis across the US, and look and see what type of website is ranking and ranking well. And then there's a lot of it you just got to put in the homework and understand the nuances of, they don't call it a drill, they call it a hand piece, and just start to learn about it that way. Another really good resource is Facebook groups. If you jump into a group, I would suggest jump in and just observe for a while and start to see the trends, the tendencies, and pick up on some of the lingo. And what I don't suggest is a lot of people decide, well, I'm gonna get in, I'm gonna jump into a dental group, and they immediately go into, it's kind of like that LinkedIn thing where you haven't established any rapport, there's no relationship, you jump in and, hey, I'm a marketer, I have this thing, buy it. Mm-hmm. And I think by getting into some of these industries specific groups that are on Facebook and starting to ask some questions, really learn not only about the terms, but also the business of their business, like how many new clients, patients, customers do they need to break even, and then how many what's considered thriving, and then what's considered exceptional, and start to learn the business side of it, the ROI, and all of the numbers-based things.
Interesting. So do you just do SEO for them, or is it like more of a full digital marketing type deal?
What I have noticed lately is that we're doing more and more SEO is one of the tools in the toolbox, and adding in things like direct mail. We track everything possible under the sun. If we can track it, we are. And particularly in it gives you an opportunity to provide some value with things like business coaching. And I'll give you an example. One of the first things we do after this may be long-winded, so bear with me. One of the first things we do when we onboard a client is, we'll use the dentist as an example, we will figure out what time lunch break is in their time zone and call at like 12:35, and we'll record that call. And the reason we're doing that is, first, making sure that someone picks up the phone, and then how are they answering the phone? Are they enthusiastic? Do they pick up the phone and immediately put you on hold? And why this is important is it gives you, if they're doing things well, then it's continue the process, start the marketing machine. Conversely, if they're not doing it well, or the phone goes to voicemail or something to that effect, you have a recorded phone call that you can call the doctor and say, hey, doctor, just wanted to let you know the phone's not being answered, or it's not being answered correctly. Why you want to establish that up front is because in digital marketing, it's very easy to make the SEO guy or the marketing guy the bad guy. You can send all the traffic in the world, all of the phone calls in the world to the practice. If it's not being answered correctly, it stops there. And you're going to get a pushback of, you're going to say, well, look, doctor, you're ranking really well. And we use PhoneWagon as one of our tracking technologies. Say, look, we generated this many phone calls, and they're going to say, well, I'm not busy, or I'm not booking new patients. And that person who's answering the phone at the business or the practice is arguably one of the most important people, because if you send all this traffic and it stops right there, it doesn't matter what you can rank number one, and if the person answering the phone is killing it, your efforts are for naught. So just documenting that up front does two things. It shows you're doing your due diligence and your research, and it also gives you some leveraging power to say, we need to work on answering the phone better, those type of things.
It also probably makes you more indispensable too, right? Like, because now you're not just the guy building links or, optimizing H tags. You're an integral part of their business that if they let you go, they instantly lose that level of expertise and diagnosis and stuff, right?
Yeah, you become very sticky, and it just opens up it's interesting. We tend to have a shift where they're a little apprehensive. They sign on with us. We start to show that we're doing additional things outside of just SEO, and it flips over and they start asking you questions about portions of their business that aren't really under your span of control, but they trust your opinion. as the expert. And the more you can ingrain yourself and build that relationship, the longer they're going to stay on as a client.
Conversely, how do you prevent becoming like the web guy, where they just throw literally everything web that they need at you, whether and maybe it's like outside your scope of responsibility? I know I've had times when we were talking, and I don't want to put details out there, but you were frustrated because you were having to do some web design type things that weren't really in the scope of what you agreed to. So how do you establish what you do and what you do not do?
We actually just finished going through a round of contract updates with our attorney, and through his expertise in helping us define, a lot of it is defining expectations very clearly up front. And we had a decent contract statement of work that we were working with, and it had some places in it, to your point, where you end up becoming it's on the internet, so they own it. And we clearly defined, one of the things that we made very clear is hosting type things, that we're not the host. If the website goes down, if it's not accessible, that's not on our plate. And part of this is very intentional, because something like that prevents you from scaling. If you're the web guy and you decide to go on vacation, take some time off, invariably, the second you step off the plane onto vacation, the phone's going to ring. And I actually had it happened. I think I was in Barcelona when that happened, when I was like, of course, I'm on vacation and I've been feet on the ground for less than 10 minutes and the phone's ringing with, hey, the website's broken. So if you clearly define for them, hey, if your website goes down, here's the phone number you need to call. This company is the dedicated host, 24/7, 365, call them. And just, it's all about expectations so that there's no surprises. And we've even gone so far as to really spell out what marketing is, because we've had feedback that some of the doctors are not real sure what they're paying for.
That's normal, I think. I think it's an important point, and I think that you're not handing them a widget, so it's abstract to some people, especially people that aren't fluent in marketing. So I think it's important to explain specifically what you get and what you don't. I think that that's absolutely cost me business over the years, because I'm very, very transparent and specific on what I will and will not do. But it's also helped me retain people for a long time, because they know exactly what they're getting and what they're not going to get from me. And I think everybody needs to run their business the way they feel is right. But I think that that's a much more long-term approach to having success than it is to just say, I do marketing, and then, just kind of go from there. People that will say whatever they need to say to close the deal, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Great. So let's move away from the business side of it now, and more of and get more into the SEO, because I know that's what a lot of people here are probably more interested in, even though they probably should focus on the sales a little bit. What do you think is important as far as the actual implementation of SEO? Is it, building links? Is it establishing a brand, a reputation, its on page? What do you consider your specialty? What do you think is important?
I think the first and foremost is strategy, and having a repeatable, documented process, that kind of a laundry list of, when we have an internal document that is the same for every client, and it's a checklist to go through and audit the site and give it a benchmark. And from there, based on the conversation we've had with the client, then you establish a strategy. And by that, I mean, based on what they tell you, do they want to wait a little bit longer and go for maybe a bigger keyword? Or some people like to go for more of what they call the low-hanging fruit. I've always been top of the mountain, that if the term is dentistry, I'm going for that one, and everything else will come and fall in line once that big one gets there. The way that I was taught SEO years ago is very strong on the foundational old school HTML on-page stuff. I think as I've watched it evolve over the years, the one constant has been very consistent, well done on-page and site structure. And in some niches, you can get away with ranking really well with just that and minimal links. And I do things in a very metered, I don't call it dripped, but it's a very metered approach where first thing is always on-page site structure, see where it's at. Then it's the social foundational links come in next, and then watch and see what happens. And then if you need to or want to buy links, start building links. That's the building links is way down the chain for me, because you kind of in a scientific method of do something, watch the results, do something else, watch the results. And as you progress through this, you know if A works, B works, and then when you go from B to C, something breaks, you've isolated where that problem is, instead of, if you start off and do on-page site structure, social signals, all of this stuff and links, and it either works or doesn't work, you have no idea what the cause was for the results.
Well, there's a business side to that too. Like if you can get it all done with technical and on-page, that saves you a pile of money and time. Like linking is definitely the most costly, like financially speaking, of the things that you need to do in SEO. So if you can get that all, if you can make that as effective as possible and minimize it as much as possible, and I'm kind of shooting myself here because I do sell a lot of linking packages, but you can save yourself a lot of money in the long run too. And you get to that point where you're just collecting invoices every month instead of having to really do something every, like, you know what I mean? Having to really work on it and spend a lot of time on it.
Yeah, I feel like the heavy lifting is all done in month one and spills over into month two. And if done correctly, you get into a maintenance mode where it's not a 12 hours a day trying to get this thing to rank and then stay ranked. If done correctly, everything after month three should just be monitoring, auditing, and riding through algorithm updates. I know you and I touch on this from time to time, but one of the biggest things I see that can be problematic as an SEO is when Google rolls out the algorithm, the natural inclination, and trust me, I've been there. Google put out an algorithm, my site dropped. Oh God, what do I do? And the inclination is that, well, I'm gonna start throwing links at her. I'm gonna start doing this. And 9 times out of 10, and maybe even 9.5 times out of 10, my first reaction is to let it sit for at least 2 weeks. And then sometimes even longer, because I've seen, particularly if it's a major, like not just a minor, if it's a major announced algorithm update, or a core update, you're going to see some pretty insane rankings for a while. And I can't remember who it was that taught me SEO, but they had made mention that if you go in and make an adjustment after an algorithm, in some ways that can be a bit of a tell, because to me, the best SEO is a site that doesn't look like it's SEO. It looks natural and doesn't have a bunch of, particularly with a backlink profile.
Yeah, so basically what you're doing when that happens and you wait is what we call PlayStation SEO. What I mean by that, I'm going to coin that term. What I mean by that is when something happens, and it's still shaking out and you're not sure what to do, the best thing to do is go play PlayStation for a while and ignore it instead of like overreacting and trying to fix it. To use an analogy, and this may be a little crude, so forgive me anybody that this offends, but it's like when you're in a relationship and maybe you start having a little trouble with that relationship and you try to go overboard to fix the problem by, compensating and being overbearing and so on, instead of just letting it be and like letting things simmer and then going back and reassessing. And I think we see that a lot with people in the training we do and things like that. So I hope that analogy didn't offend anybody, but I think that makes sense.
Well, it takes a certain mindset. Like I said, I was absolutely guilty of it. When you first start out, typically you don't have the advantage of having more clients is that you still give them the attention, but it's not. When we first started, I think we had 2 clients, and if you're trying to fill up 8 hours, 10 hours in a day, and you only have 2 clients, you're laser focused in, and you're sitting in front of the F5 and refreshing. And when you have a bigger body of clients, there's a natural, I don't want to call it ignoring it, but there's a pace to, I'm working on this client this week, this client this week, the next one, and it just by the course of your workload, you give the other ones some breathing room and some germination time.
Makes sense. Conversely, that's one of the reasons that I won't take on a client that expects me to give them, like, you'll get this deliverable, this deliverable, this deliverable, I'll build this many links. I won't take on people that do that. And if I get someone that starts asking me those sorts of things, I wish them well in their future endeavors, because they aren't paying me for my time or specific tasks. They're paying me for results that I'm able to get them. Now, I'm going to communicate to them what to expect on those results, but if they start demanding, how many links I build and how much time I put in, I don't think it's going to be a good fit. And I don't know if you feel the same way, but what do you think?
Yeah, I think that's a slippery slope, and I know this is sometimes a trigger for you, but I think it's a valid point. Is there's a fine line between them understanding what you're doing and what the result. I always try and tie it back to what we're doing is industry standard SEO process, and you hired us to increase your visibility, hopefully increase your business, but if we get into over documentation and wanting to see, basically sitting on my lap and, hey, what are you doing? There's a couple things going on there. One, I have been in a corporate situation, and the reason I got out is because I don't play well with that level of supervision. That's one of the reasons I got into self-employment, was so that I don't have that level of micromanagement. The other part too is it becomes busy work, and you're taking away. The way that I position it is, by me having to spend time to generate these reports, which they may or may not understand, it's essentially busy. I phrase it a lot more eloquently than this, but it's essentially busy work that's taking away from efforts I could be putting towards improving your website. And you really don't need to know how the sausage is made. Does it taste good? And did I deliver it on time? Those are kind of the two. There's an SEO colleague of mine that does not do any reporting, there's no screen sharing, no Skype calls. He basically has a 15-minute phone call once a month and calls up and says, are we good? Yes, answers any question, and we're done. It's pretty Spartan approach and pretty ballsy, but he's had pretty good success with it.
I know some people that go even further than that, and don't give anything other than maybe like, these are your rankings. So I also get why that makes a client uncomfortable, but it's definitely a balance that you want to strike on. And yeah, you're right. It definitely is a trigger for me that if somebody wants me to report to them, it's not going to work. And like, they don't understand that if it also encourages you to be less efficient. Like, if I'm accounting for my hours, I'm going to take longer to do something I can get done more quickly. And if I can get it done quickly, I'm not going to fill up the rest of my time just to meet whatever hours they expect me to work. So that's another reason, is that working by the hour encourages you to be less efficient, in my experience. So
yeah, I was going to say the same thing, where when you get into that hourly, they're viewing you in an hourly mindset, then you run the risk of having to come up with, they're not understanding the value that something may only take me 5 minutes to do, but it ends up having $10,000 worth of value from one or two little tweaks. And you're paying for the skill set and the expertise, not how long it took me to do this. And that hourly, I always cringe a little bit when you read posts or hear people talking about how much should I charge an hour. That's why we do everything in the agencies at a flat fee, because the client gets a predictable spend, and then you get into, you're delivering that value and not having to say, well, I did this at 10 hours at a $50 an hour rate, so there's 400, all of this extra math that's really not necessary. So it's flat fee, everything's included. Some months I may just audit and say, yep, we're good. And other months you may earn every bit of that, $5,000 a month.
Well, and they're also paying for the time that it took you to learn that skill to be able to do it that quickly. It's like that's really how I've always explained it back when I bothered to explain those sorts of things. But you're not paying for the 5 minutes it took me to do that. You're paying for the 5 years it took me to learn how to do it in 5 minutes. So I think that's it's a little bit, I'd be a little bit more eloquent about it than that, but I think that's an analogy people can understand. And if they don't, then they can go find somebody that will be happy to report to them. So we are, for those just jumping on, I'm here with Scott Allen. Scott is a dental and medical SEO industry expert. He is very, very strong with on-page and technical SEO, and he's another coach in Superstar SEO Academy, located at superstarseo.com/academy. And he was once in the band Concrete Blonde for a brief time, although he doesn't like to talk too much about that. So.
I need to pull that one back out.
So if you have any questions for Scott or myself, you can drop those in the comments. We're just going to keep talking. In fact, this is a good time to talk about that. I've been doing these AMAs for about 20 months now, roughly. And I feel like I've kind of exhausted that concept. So I'm going to be changing direction a little bit. I'm still toying with the name, but I want to go in more of like a podcast type format where I'll either have a guest on and we'll do kind of like we're doing now, or like we did last week with Jim. And I've done a few others here and there, or I'll just talk about a particular topic and then take questions. I think that will, first of all, it makes me look far less pompous to be asking me anything because I know everything. But also I think it brings more value, as much as I hate that term, brings more value to people that are watching. So that's kind of the direction we're going to be going with these in the next days, weeks, months, years, and so on. So I hope people enjoy that. Joe says, are you a fine artist? I think he's asking you, do you do artwork or?
Yeah, one of my degrees is in painting. The other one is in sculpture. So yes, I have art school scars.
Ironically, that's actually how Scott and I got to be friends. Is he ordered a low-dollar service from me on another marketplace, and he gave me like the wrong information or something. And he said, "Can you fix this for me? It's my fault, but if you fix it for me, I'll send you this print of," I forget the name of that movie, but this piece of art that he did, and it was a print of what's the Nightmare Before Christmas. Whatever. I'll bring it out. I'll roll it out and get the picture of it out. But anyway, he said, I'll send you this if you'll take care of that for me, which I would have fixed anyway. And then we just got talking from there. So that's kind of how I got to know Scott. That's the background on that, is because he's an artist. So, and trivia here. You used to also work as a DJ. Is that right? I
did. Back when we actually had to carry vinyl records into the club and play, right? The concept's still the same, but the technology, this is one of those places where technology's instead of, I think if memory serves, you get about 300-400 records with you total for a night, versus if you've got a laptop, you've got unlimited, potentially unlimited music. So there were times where I was playing and I was like, man, I really wish I had this record, and I didn't. And being able to pull it up on the laptop would have been much easier.
I have some friends that are DJs, and some of them tend to be purists about that and say that if you're just using an iPod or a laptop, that you're not really a DJ, that you're just pressing play. I was like, well, I mean, I guess I can understand why if you were in it, you would feel that way, but what do you think about that?
Well, I think there's a difference between, if you want to keep, quote unquote, keep it real and underground, which is where it all kind of began. The vinyl is, you cannot fake the skill set on vinyl, because it doesn't, if you're playing traditional, not Serato or any sort of DJ software, if you're just playing with vinyl records, it's going to become evident pretty quick whether or not you can beat mix or not. With the computer stuff, there's more of a, I think the majority of the audience doesn't really care. It's more of that entertainment component to it. And I think some of that has people are conditioned when they go watch live music is to look at the stage and watch the performer singing a song, and watching somebody stand like this for a couple hours is not all that exciting. So I think that's where the evolution of the entertainment side of it has moved more towards the digital allows you to pay less attention to the craft of it and more about the vibe and the environment you're trying to create.
Yeah, I actually have a friend who's a DJ, and he said that he has to put on a show as much as he does control the music, because people come to that club to see him having a good time. If he's just standing there, pressing play, looking bored, that it's going to affect business. It's going to affect the good time that people have going there. So I think that makes sense. What you're saying is that they need to learn how to put on a show as well as know how to, I don't know enough about it to use the right terms, is how to make the music sound.
Well, part of it is I'm an awful dancer, so I've always enjoyed the music, and it gave me a way to be involved in the scene without actually having to get out on the dance floor. And I played anything. I started off playing hip hop records and playing hip hop clubs, and then finally got into like more progressive house, trance for a while type of stuff, and then I was playing a bunch of funk records. And then the cool thing about my DJ career is I knew definitively the last night that I was going to DJ, that was going to be it. I was going to hang it up. Left on good terms with the owner, and I got to call my shot. I have no regrets with the walk off. So it was a cool experience.
That's a pretty diverse set of careers and experience you've had. How do you go from, because I'm not creative at all. Anybody that's seen my Photoshop work knows that. But like, how do you go from doing graphics and music and things like that to something like marketing and SEO, where they're like, it's much more like technical and, I don't know, behind the scenes kind of thing? How did you make that transition?
Well, I started off in Lawrence, Kansas I had just graduated, and I had started to learn Photoshop, and I figured out if I could trade Photoshop flyer designs to get free admission to the shows, that ended up being a nice little trade. And then I started working at the club, and for a while it was just bands, and then they brought a DJ through, and I had grown up listening to Run DMC and LL Cool J and that type of stuff, and the first time seeing a guy playing records, I was like, whoa, what's this? And started coming in when the club wasn't open and practicing. And then I bought my own turntables and just spent hours in my bedroom just back and forth learning how to mix the records. I finally got confident enough to play out in public, and then the DJ at the time decided he didn't want to do it anymore, and that paid my rent, my mortgage, or not my mortgage at the time, that paid my rent, and that was my job 3 nights a week. And the lifestyle will eat you alive if you're not careful, but you can make some pretty good money working for 16 hours a week probably.
Mm-hmm. And you worked with some opened, or I don't know if you opened or worked the same night as some pretty big bands, right?
Yeah, I was, some of the highlights are, I was actually on stage running the side light board for Radiohead when they came through the first time. George Clinton. I think the biggest name was Johnny Cash. He did a show at the Legiit Center on campus at University of Kansas, and I got to pick him up from the hotel and drive him over to the Legiit Center. And that was, for the most part, I never really got starstruck, but that's the one that I did, where it was like, he has a very obvious presence when he's in the room. Or he did.
What was he like? Like, did you get to talk to him at all?
He was really quiet, and he was really, I asked him kind of in the ride over, I said, out of the group that you ran with, who was the wild child? And he asked me who I thought. I said, I think it was Waylon Jennings. And he was like, no. And it turned out that apparently Glenn Campbell, when he was drinking, was hard to control. And we had kind of a brief conversation. And then he said, I'd like to be left alone. And they had a big piano out on stage and just a single light. And he walked out, and I did not honor his wishes, but in hindsight, I'm glad I paid attention to this. This was at the time where he had was working with Rick Rubin and did the cover of Nine Inch Nails' "Hurt." And he walked out on stage and opened up the piano. He ran his hand across the top of the piano and then opened it up and sat down and prayed. And then he started playing. And my friend Doug Richards and I were in the back of the room watching this. We were not supposed to, but I was like, this is really cool. And when he was done playing the little piano warm-up, he closed it down, put his hands on it, and I think he was praying again, and then he walked off, and I'll never forget that.
That's crazy. So why did you stop doing that? Or was just, no offense, got older, it's kind of a younger man's game? Or?
Well, I made reference to one of the clubs that I DJ'd in, it was open until 4 a.m. So if you're drinking beers and playing music and the music stops at 4, you end up getting everything loaded out and packed up. You're looking at 4:30, and then if you want to have, another, typically the staff would have a beer or two afterwards. So you're looking at 4:45, almost 5:30 sometimes in the morning. And you come home, you're still kind of amped up, get some food, and by the time you go to bed, you're looking sometimes 7 a.m. and your sleep schedule is so out of whack with the quote unquote normal world that it just got to a point where I felt like I got what I wanted out of it, and it's just time to move on to do something different.
And is that when you got into SEO, or there was like a corporate career in between, right?
After that, I was still DJing one night a week when I was at Sprint, and then it just got to be too much with the corporate workload, and then particularly the Friday nights where I had worked 8 hours at Sprint, had to come home, pack up the records, take a nap, and then DJ. My weekend was shot. And I actually, the way I got into SEO is Sprint was doing continual layoffs. And I got to the point where I decided I don't want this pressure, this stress. And they offered voluntary separation. And I took it, and because I had been there for 13 years, I ended up having almost a year and a half of severance pay and insurance and the whole 9 yards. And my business partner called me up, and at the time he wasn't my business partner, and he said, "Hey, I bought this SEO training, and it's from a group that you and I both come from with the 3 letters." And he said, "You want to take this?" And I was kind of like, "Yeah, we'll see." And I got into the training, and for whatever reason, I love it. And that's the way I started off is I spooled up I ranked for a keyword that didn't have any search volume. And I was super proud of myself. And I'm like, look at this. And it had 0 search volume. And then spooled up another test site, got it to rank. And then I actually went through and decided, okay, I know how to rank this. And I intentionally got it penalized to see if I break this, can I dig it out of the hole? And I was able to fix what I had done and diagnose why it was getting penalized. And at that point, we just started taking on clients. And one of our clients we still have was our 3rd client.
Oh, wow.
The trainer that we have has been with us for years.
That's awesome. So is that how you recommend people go about learning, is apply and break it and fix it, and apply and break it and fix it? Or how do you, and I know you have a background also in education, like how people learn. So is that how you recommend it, or what would you suggest to someone that wants to learn?
This is a bit of a bold statement, but I think I understand that when you get into this, you do need to start making money initially. But I think there's also with SEO, there's a responsibility component. You're taking a business owner's money that they work hard for, and if you are not confident in your skill set, you can't deliver the results. And I think you need to spend more time working internally and testing and really becoming, I'm not saying you have to be an absolute master of your craft, but you need to be able to deliver a viable product or viable results to the client. And some of the ways you can do things, kind of micro commitments, instead of taking on a full boat SEO campaign, start with something small and say, hey, let me optimize your Google My Business listing. Let me do a citation audit. Let me help you with social media posting. And that way you're generating some income. There's not nearly the pressure that comes with delivering SEO results. And as your skill set comes up, it's also a very good way to transition into a full boat. Instead of walking in and saying it's $2,500 a month, you start with let me optimize your Google My Business listing for $500.
Mm-hmm.
If you like that and you decide, you can engage, and for another $500 a month, let me take care of your social media posting. Now you're sitting at $1,000 a month. You're not killing it, but $1,000 is a pretty good starting point. And then you add in, let me do a citation audit for you. And you can, with some of these services, if you're leading into SEO, say it's a $500 one-time fee for a citation audit. If you decide to use this for SEO services, we'll apply that to your first month bill, and you just walk them. That's one of the biggest things we've done in the last year is work on how to have little micro engagements, those point of entry services that you can engage them for something from a business owner perspective. $500 is not that big of a risk. It's a one-time thing. And that's something where if they say, yeah, let's do it, you want to make sure you over deliver. Mm-hmm. Then they start to trust you. They've spent money with you. So getting them to spend money with you in additional time or longer and longer, you're building that relationship, your skill set's coming up. And, if you're in the academy, you've got a wealth of talent supporting you there. And the user group, the students themselves are pretty savvy. So you're not out on an island by yourself. You've got that support network to tap into.
Great. Brian asks, let me see if I can get this on the screen. Kind of covers our face up, but it says, I've been asking about this in the group lately, and I get pieces and parts of answers here and there. I'd love to have the rundown on how you set up service area pages on a website. I have a client that has one physical location, but the area they serve can be separated into 4 specific areas. Not really cities, but areas that include multiple cities. What would site layout look like for that?
I would do a service area, URL name / areas we serve or service areas. And then each one of those city pages, this is the way I do it. There's not a right or wrong answer, but I've had success with this. It's URL / service areas. And then underneath those, you want to have, it's like Winter Park, Orlando, and like Sanford, Florida. So you got kind of a cluster. They don't necessarily have to be all in the same area. It helps because you can interlink those. But we'll take the Orlando page. So you got URL, service areas, Orlando. Orlando is in some ways a mini standalone landing page that if you've done it correctly, if someone searches for your service in Orlando, that page should rank above the main website. If the main URL is more driven around brand, the service area has descriptions of Orlando, kind of sprinklings of plumbing services available in Orlando. Do you need bathroom repair, Orlando? And I have a generic services page. So you got plumbing, clog, toilet replacement, whatever, and you're linking for Orlando toilet replacement, and then you link over to the main service. And you can also, at the bottom of those service pages, do a mention of also providing services in Winter Park and whatever the other city names are. It's the main thing with, I think what people get hung up on is there are literally about 10 different ways to do this and they all work. The takeaway, if you're confused or struggling with the service area thing, is if you do keep your URL and your site structure consistent. So if you just do, a lot of guys do URL / city name with a keyword in it. make sure you do all of your city pages are set up that same way. I tend to do an additional click deeper. So you got service area page or service area location. Just consistency is the main thing. If you do it one way for one location, do it for all the other locations.
Great. And if they wanted to learn more about that from you, what would be a good place to do that?
Superstar Academy.
Yeah.
We actually have
that work out.
video on that plumbing site in Kansas City is still the one that I always showed, use as the example. They've even picked up 3 or 4 little more suburbs, and they're doing something that they've actually got a neighborhood name that is, apparently there's enough search volume there, but they're ranking for it, and they're swallowing. And I actually enjoy it because it's obviously SEO'd. There are some corporate bigger players in the space, and this is a not a mom and pop shop, but they are a smaller shop, and it's really enjoyable to see them get those ranking wins.
That's awesome. That's good. Yeah, it is nice to. That's something actually I've been focusing on lately, is trying to get some more. And I don't even really need it, but I want to pick up some more businesses local to where I live, because I don't know, most of my business has been from people in other parts of the country or even the world, and that's great. But I'd like to give. It's corny. It sounds corny, but I'd like to give back and work with where I've lived 99% of my life too, and that's something we've been focusing on here more lately. So I agree. It's kind of my long way of saying that. Keith says hi, Chris and Scott. Hey Keith, how's it going? Brian says, I'm in the academy. I've gone through the section that covers location, but I wasn't sure if service areas are different since there isn't a map related to each location. If we're talking about organic, they're not. But if you're talking about maps, then that's a little different thing. Right?
Yep. I hope.
Well, yeah, what I mean is map doesn't matter if map is only important for maps.
Yep.
That rhymes.
Brian, I want to bring this up too, that for a while there was a lot of suggestion to put a map in the footer. We have moved away from that. What I've been doing for probably about the last 6 months or a year, maybe even longer, is instead of the reason, if you put an embedded map in your footer and then you embed a map on your location page, you're going to end up, the maps are going to fight. So I've actually pulled it out, and on the footers, I end up having locations we serve that links to that landing location page, and then that's got an embedded map. So I'm only using a map on a single page typically.
That makes sense. Also, it's important to reiterate, Brian and I, as far as we know, not related. Though we haven't done the full genealogy to make sure yet. All right, guys, if you have any questions on anything, SEO, DJing, marketing, business for Scott or myself, this is your chance. We've been here for almost an hour now. And this is I've covered pretty much everything I wanted to talk about. But if you have any questions, we'll be happy to answer them. Don says, I forgot. Can I watch a recording of this later? Heading into a meeting and can't stay. Nope, sorry. This is self-destructs after it's over. No. This will be uploaded. This will stay right where it is, wherever it is that you're watching right now, and it will be uploaded to what's that video site? YouTube later today. As well. So, and 41 now. Give me a break. Sometimes the memory is not what it used to be. So, what kind of color you got there?
There's a star, and then one of my paintings, and then I've got a portrait of Picasso right there.
It's awesome. So, got a few spots you need to fill in though.
Yeah, I've got a blank. I need to figure out what I want to do back here.
Yeah, same for me. Mine is it covers the whole outside, but on the inside I don't have anything, so I want to get that filled in at some point too. So. Yeah,
some of mine, some of this is a little bit faded because I patient and forget to put sunscreen on it, but I wanted to go back, and I liked what you were talking about with the format of this as far as the podcast approach instead of the AMA thing, because it's what I've noticed with the podcast people that I follow having that themed, like if they've got a library of podcasts and the titles are this is so and so and we're talking about this, you can kind of shape if you sit down and you're not listening to the daily podcast, if you want to listen to something different, you go through and be like, ooh, that's interesting. And I think in that library and it also keeps the conversation on track if it's themed and there's today we're going to be talking specifically about this type of thing. I think it's a little bit more interesting for the listener.
Right. And it doesn't depend on me babbling when I run out of questions, That was one of the reasons I decided to go that direction as well. And sometimes, there'll be like a spot where there's 15 questions in a row and there's none. And I don't have a theme to talk about, so I just kind of ramble, which I can do with the best of them, but it's probably not the most entertaining way of.
Jeff's here, so we can't make an old joke. So
right. Jessica says, Scott, do you help your clients with their social media as well, like Instagram? And if so, what are your ideas to optimize Instagram for search engines?
We do with some of the clients. A lot of times, just because of the nature of where Instagram does really well is actually having the person holding the phone and uploading directly instead of doing it through a browser. You can certainly do that to supplement what they're doing. We do a lot of coaching, and particularly with the dentist, I have a very frank conversation with them that this is ultimately your practice. If something were to go awry for something like a HIPAA violation, that's going to be on you. And just coaching them very specifically on, and this is going to get very dental specific, as an example of what we talk to them about. Dentists over the course of being a dentist get very desensitized to bloody type procedures or instruments in the mouth, and they like to show off from a technical perspective, but I always put the lens of, if I'm a new patient and the first thing I see for your practice is somebody setting an implant and it's blood city, if you're dental phobic or you have dental fears, you're going to say nope and click off of that. So coaching them on the personality of the brand, giving them a face behind the practice, and having a little bit of fun with the staff. And you can tie in reviews and testimonials. You can that's an excellent place to use an Instagram video as a testimonial. Grab that. This is completely borrowed from Gary Vee, but anytime you can take a piece of content and chop it up and use it multiple places. So if you've got a testimonial that you like, chop it up and put it into a YouTube video, embed that into a blog post. Same thing with your Instagram stuff. We do it more in a coaching sense to give you a very long-winded answer.
Okay. Do you find that do you find much benefit to that? I don't know Instagram very well. I had somebody running mine for a year because it's not a good fit for me. Did you find it drove any business for that type of business?
I think it's good for visibility. I don't think it directly equates. If you're looking for pure organic improvement in rankings, I don't really see a correlation between the activity and rankings. But if you
what I mean by that is, do you actually get any leads or anything from it?
From time to time, yes, because one of the dentists we work with he was actually on one of the dentists on Extreme Makeover. So his specialty is veneers and whitening. And when we run certain campaigns when we're going into wedding season, we're running a lot of whitening, straightening, Invisalign, those type of things. And we have gotten some leads off of the happy bride sitting in the chair and showing her, look at my new smile and that type of thing.
Okay. All right. Joe says, Picasso, not a great painter, but one of the best marketers of all time. Is that kind of a hot take? Your sound just got really wacky. I don't know what's going on.
Do what now?
Oh, there you go. For a minute there, your sound was all weird, but I think you're good now.
Well, the reason behind Picasso is there's a couple things. One is he has a quote that it took him 80 years to achieve the mind of a child. So it's kind of a keep that natural curiosity and keep learning as part of it. And the guy was the original. He would reinvent himself he did not care. He would blow it up and start something entirely different. And always, that's the component of him that I admired, is the ability to basically say, I'm done with this, and put on a different hat and do something entirely different.
Kind of the Madonna of his day. So.
Yeah.
All right. We got about 5 minutes left. I think I'll open it up to you. Is there anything you'd like to talk about or plug or anything you want to say before we call it a day?
Just going back to with the SEO stuff, the takeaways from me today are the fundamentals still matter. I think they will always matter. And that's one of the most underrated things in SEO is if you get really, really good at site structure and on page, that's a decided advantage over a lot of people that are in the game that win it by throwing links at something. And the second thing is the more business acumen you can get, the more business savvy you can get, the better your career will be as an SEO, as a marketing person, to have all of the reading books, listening to podcasts, asking people that are mentors, someone you admire that's having success, ask them, what are they doing in their, not necessarily the nuts and bolts of SEO, but what are they doing in their business? The simple things like contracts, listening to what a good sales call sounds like. I had a guy the other day that I engaged because I don't have a lot of extra time right now to do a particular project. And it was honestly one of the worst calls I've been on because hey, tell me a little bit about your service. Well, I do branding, and that it just got quiet. So your phone skills, even though if you're not comfortable, it's worth every penny to hire someone who's good on the phone for you.
Interesting.
So
do you handle the phone calling yourself? Do you still do that kind of outreach, or are you at a point now where business comes to you?
It's a little bit of both. When we do, I'm always on the calls with the doctors because you can teach somebody general sales skills, but there's a level of dental/medical knowledge that I've had to amass it over the years, and it's not something that I can just naturally. And through a weird progression of course study at university, I ended up taking a lot of Latin, which at the time was somewhat useless. But now in the medical profession, if they start dropping Latin terms, I understand, and that gives me a little bit of an advantage as well.
That's awesome. So I often talk about how the separation between cause and effect, the longer you can wait, is where success comes from. And the fact that you took that, not to put an age on you, but 20 years ago, has ended up paying off today. So always appreciate anything you can pick up, any talent, any skill, any piece of knowledge, anything like that. So that's cool to know. Anything else?
That's it.
All right. Well, we are right at an hour, so I think that worked out really well. Thanks for coming on. I know you're very busy. I know you have other things you have to do today, hence why we had to move the time. So I appreciate you taking the time out to do it. If everybody that's left enjoyed that, please say, give Scott some thanks for taking the time out to join us. And if you want to learn more from Scott or from me, you can always join us at Superstar SEO Academy. That's superstarseo.com/academy. This is just 50% of the coaching team you have there. And we literally have so much SEO content that we broke the software that hosts it. And I have to keep moving things around so it'll keep working. That's not a joke at all. That's something that has come up. So, all right. That's it. Thanks for coming on, Scott. And thanks to everybody for watching. And most importantly, figure out what you want out of life. Go out and get it, because you owe it to yourself and you owe it to everybody else to be the best that you can be. So have a great weekend, and we'll see you next time.